What is up, party people? It is Brad Large. We are going through Matthew chapter 8, and we're going to go through some verses here. We left off at verse 13, so we're going to pick up at 14. And this is an interesting section, I think, because it's kind of a little bit different than the other Gospels. In some Gospel stories, Jesus is doing miracles and talking, and there's like great crowds, and people are coming to him, but here we see miracles, and let's see the response. And when Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her. She rose and began to serve him. That evening they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He took our illnesses and bore our diseases. So it's kind of interesting because he heals Peter's mother-in-law, and she rises and begins to serve him, right? But I think that's an interesting symbol that Peter's mother, but she's rising and she's serving the household at this point. She's serving Jesus. So she rose and began to serve him, right? So he raised her from sickness. So there's a symbol of her being sick, lying in bed, right? It could be, anyway. So there's this idea that she's there, and Jesus raises her up, and she serves Jesus. Now, if we compare and contrast that to that evening, they brought him many. So there's lots of people coming, and it says that it's not the people don't start following him or anything. Like, that's not what it says. It says that he did this to fulfill Isaiah. So I thought that was kind of interesting that it says specifically, he took our illnesses and bore our diseases, to fulfill this quote in Isaiah. So in verses 18, now when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. And a scribe came up and said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Another of the disciples said to him, "Lord, let me go first and bury my father." And Jesus said to him, "Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead." So again, Jesus sees a crowd around him, and he's moving on. So he sees a crowd, and he's not staying to convert the crowd. He's moving on. And I think it's interesting because Jesus stays focused on what he is intending to do. There's a very focused approach in Matthew. He doesn't get distracted by the miracles and the other things a lot, if at all. And so when the scribe comes up, Jesus is saying, foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, right? The Son of Man is one of Jesus's favorite ways to refer to himself. It's the one that he uses most often. So not only is Jesus not appearing to try to convert people or teach them, we had the first discourse in Matthew, and we've got some healing. We're going to have the second discourse coming up. And so there's a lot of teaching there, but the teaching is about how difficult it is. There's not a lot of hope at this point. I mean, these people come up. Now, we know that the Jesus is the hope, and so we see that now. We read that into the text. But at this point, these people, Jesus is actively not revealing himself. So let that sink in for a second. He's saying, actually, everybody's so sinful that even if you look at your brother in anger, you might as well have murdered them. That's your sinful nature. That points to your sinful nature. That's why you will not inherit the kingdom. Right? And then here, he's got two people that want to follow him, and he says, whoa, it's hard. Okay? He's not saying, yeah, come on, man. Let's go. Let's go show people we love them. Let's go. No, he's saying this is hard, right? And you have to be focused on just this. The focus that it takes, right? Like Jesus seeing the crowd and moving on. And then this man saying, let me go bury my father, right? Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said, follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. Focus. It's amazing. So they do, in verse 23, when he got to the boat, his disciples followed him, and behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep. So there's a storm. Jesus is asleep, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?" Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" So you see that his disciples are impacted by the miracles. Oftentimes they're the ones that are seeing the miracles and being impacted by this, but he's already chosen the disciples. So they're part of like the inner circle, right? But very often we see them being astonished, and the crowds, we're not seeing the same reaction from all the crowds all the time. And of course, I would imagine that if you just think about the scene, there's a certain amount that's implied there, but it's not really making a big deal about it. In fact, Matthew again is kind of downplaying the miracles' impact on the crowds, that it wasn't the miracles that were saving people. So one thing that I think is really interesting about this is in verse 26, and he said to them, "Why are you afraid, of you of little faith?" So Jesus is asleep on the boat while there's a huge storm. He's given speeches about anxiety and trusting God, putting faith in God. The waves are crashing into the boat and it's getting swamped, right? So you can just imagine this chaotic scene, and Jesus is just asleep in the boat. They went and woke him up. "Save us, Lord," right? "We're perishing." He asks why they're afraid, "You of little faith," right? And then he rises and rebukes the wind and the sea, and the disciples are astonished that he's able to do this. What I think is great about this is this word for little. The word for little here is translated as little often, but when he says this, the word could also kind of mean defective or deficient. It points to this idea of small, defective, deficient, not effective, not enough. But when we say little, just that, it sounds like not enough. But the problem with people is we always have faith in something. You always have faith in something. You are always believing some worldview. You are swimming in a worldview. You might not even know what your worldview is, but you have faith in something right now. And what I think this is pointing to, this little, this defective, this deficient faith, is faith that isn't defined and faith that isn't focused on God. When we put our faith in God, that's when we have a firm foundation. That's when we can move mountains. That's faith the size of a mustard seed, right? Like it's talked about in other places as this little idea of faith. It's not how much faith you have. Everybody has faith in something. It's what you're putting it on. Whether it's deficient and defective, or whether you're putting your hope in God. So I thought that really stood out to me, and I just kind of wanted to share that with you guys. But there we have verses 14 through 27. So we got through another chunk here, and then we've got a section where Jesus heals 2 men with demons that we'll jump into next, and then we're into chapter 9. So again, just to recap, if you're still hanging out with me, in the first few chapters of Matthew, Jesus is building his authority, right? And so to take a look at what's happened so far is the birth story, the genealogy of Christ that shows that his authority there, the visit of the wise men in chapter 2, and his, the analogies to Exodus and Moses and all of that happening in Matthew, where he's being compared to this other Exodus story that's about redemption. And then we have John the Baptist preparing the way, like an Elijah type story. And all throughout this, it's building a case that Jesus has the authority of the earthly authority of David mixed with the priestly authority of Moses, it looks like. And just it's building this idea of the prophets pointing to the Messiah all the way up through this. And then we have the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus gives us like the Christian how-to. And now he's going around being an example with the disciples after that. And he's starting to heal and preach more. And so after chapter 9, we get into the next discourse, and we'll have a couple different periods of Jesus before he gets to the passion narrative. But I just want to put that in perspective real quick here as well. Hopefully you like these videos. If you do, like and subscribe. Put in the comments what you liked about the passage that we review. And these are just for you to study the Bible and dig deeper on your own time, and to give you examples of how to look at different areas in the Bible. So if you have something to add to the conversation, I'd love to hear it in the comments. But like I said, like and subscribe to catch all the videos, and I will catch you soon. All right, peace.